Hello everyone, Fred here. In this installment of TPP Dynamite, I'm going to be reviewing episode 7 of Marvel's She-Hulk Attorney at Law, The Retreat. First things first though, if you haven't already, let me encourage you to subscribe to my channel. I'm an author of young adult and adult mystery novels. To date, I've released 3 books, The Women in White, The Lethal List, and most recently, Textbook Murder, which are all on sale. I also make videos in which I review popular books, television series, and films. With that in mind, and without further ado, welcome to my review of She-Hulk Attorney at Law's 7th episode, The Retreat. The episode opens with a cute little montage set to Haim's Now I'm In It, of Jen and Josh's slowly falling in love after their meet cute at last episode's wedding. They send each other adorable texts, they go out on adorable dates, and Josh drops Jen off at home in an increasingly adorable goodbye scene series that ends in their spending the night together on one Thursday. Then Jen wakes up the next morning and realizes that Josh is gone. She's still over the moon with post-coital fulfillment, but Josh doesn't respond to her when she texts him. And at work, Jen complains to Nikki about how Josh hasn't texted her back, and Nikki tries to comfort her by basically advising her that Josh just needs time, that she should get her mind off of it by doing other things. Jen takes Nikki's advice by doing yoga and watching TV, but she also keeps checking her phone for new texts from Josh. On Sunday, Emil Blonsky's parole officer calls Jen out of the blue to tell her that Blonsky's ankle monitor has gone offline and to ask if she can meet him at the retreat where Blonsky is living now, just in case Blonsky turns into Abomination again. So apparently the highly funded maximum security operation that was maintaining Abomination's prison couldn't afford to send a few extra, appropriately armed officers to accompany him to check out Blonsky. Go figure. Either way, Jen agrees to go with the parole officer to check out Blonsky. The parole officer, who turns out to be quite paranoid, has Jen to stay hulked out the whole time that they're around Blonsky. It turns out that Blonsky's inhibitor is just malfunctioning after an accidental shock in an incident with an electric fence. The officer is able to fix the thing fast, and he gets away from that retreat and away from Blonsky as soon as he can. Before Jen gets to leave though, then 2 C-list characters, Man Bull and Aguila, get into a fight and destroy Jen's car by accident. These guys are part of an entire circle of C-list supervillains and somewhat superheroes whom Blonsky has basically been life coaching into making better choices while at his retreat. He apparently runs some sort of service that caters to helping people find inner peace now. Again, go figure. For Man Bull and Aguila, that has basically included helping them to work through anger and identity issues by fighting. The both of them apologize to Jen, but Jen's car is already wrecked, and Jen has to stay at the retreat until a tow company can show up and give her a ride out of there. Blonsky is glad that Jen is being forced to stay at the retreat for a while so that she can iron out some of her own conflicted personality issues, which he can see but that she can't. Jen, however, predictably blows him off and spends the next several hours roaming around trying to find cell phone service. In a little twist of irony, the only place where Jen actually can find service is in a barn where Blonsky is conducting a group therapy session with Man Bull and Aguila, as well as 2 other C-list villains called Porcupine and Saracen. Man Bull is afraid of matadors and he keeps thinking that Aguila is one of them. Porcupine is obsessively compelled to stay inside of his suit because he's afraid of feeling vulnerable. And Saracen thinks that he's a vampire and has an unhealthy longing for eating people and draining their blood. The biggest surprise for Jen comes, though, when Dirk Garthwaite, aka the Wrecker, shows up there at the retreat. It turns out that he's now a part of Blonsky's little sharing circle as well. Jen, of course, overreacts, She throws Wrecker around like a rag doll. She breaks the fourth wall. She reminds the audience about how Wrecker attacked her in an earlier episode. Blonsky, who is ironically enough the most reasonable person in this entire episode, convinces Jen to leave Wrecker alone, to actually join the sharing circle, and to talk about her problems with him and the other C-list villains and C-list heroes or whatever, as well as Wrecker. When Jen does do that, then Wrecker apologizes to her and tells her that he's moved on from the wrecking crew and turned his back on the path of violently attacking people like what he did with Jen in the earlier episode. It takes a little convincing, but Jen eventually admits to the circle that she is very much hung up on Josh and how he still hasn't texted her back. And she mainly feels this way because Josh is the first person who she thought liked her for herself as opposed to She-Hulk. She admits that she has enjoyed being able to turn into She-Hulk, a hero whom everyone loves, but feels basically like she's cheating when she does it to get benefits that human Jen cannot. And that's why she loved it so much when one man finally came along who cared about the human Jen and never even mentioned the She-Hulk Jen. And that's also why it hurt so badly when that man, Josh, ghosted her. Everyone in the share circle but Blonsky then hilariously overreacts by describing the ways that Jen should attack and or kill Josh for how he treated her, but Blonsky talks them all down as the voice of reason. After that, then all the other guys in the sharing circle convince Jen that she needs to spend more time as herself and stop using She-Hulk as her defense mechanism. Jen takes their advice, which convinces Porcupine to take his own mask off and to begin making strides towards not being in costume all the time. The sharing circle also convinces Jen to delete Josh's phone number from her phone and to make herself feel better by doing that. The men then lead Jen into going through a steam session to refresh herself. She finds herself more balanced after she gets out of there. She thanks all of the guys for helping her to find inner peace, and her tow truck finally arrives. Blonsky then invites her to come back to the retreat for more spiritual healing or whatever at any time that she feels like it, but she tells him that she will do no such thing until he gets effective Wi-Fi. Jen goes back home feeling way better about herself, and it's all done in a scene that's set pretty masterfully to Dua Lipa's IDGAF. The end of the episode, the very last scene, then cuts back to 3 days earlier, to the night when Jen finally took Josh to bed. Josh wakes up while Jen is sleeping and uses his phone to copy all information from hers. He then texts the Hulk King guy from last episode, guy or girl, I guess we're still not sure right now, to say that he also managed to get a blood sample from Jen. The end. So, here are my thoughts. First, the good. This episode is by far the best one that She-Hulk has offered up until now, although that's not exactly saying very much. Most of the past 7 installments have tended to avoid giving Jen any real character development or giving the show any real sense of direction in favor of ridiculous attempts at sitcom humor and preaching one massive eye-roll inducing sermon about just how vile all men are. This episode was a vast improvement because of just how much it breaks with that whole trend. First and foremost, this episode really is played like a rom-com more so than a sitcom. Watching Jen slowly fall in love with Josh was nothing short of charming. Watching Jen analyze and overanalyze the reasons for why he might not have texted or called the next day was equally hilarious. Second, this episode made pretty good use of the rom-com subgenre to catalyze a surprisingly deep and overdue dive into just how vulnerable and afraid and sad Jen has been feeling after getting her powers. Emil Blonsky's share circle is used as an organic way to directly discuss Jen's troubled state of mind and coach her into finding some more inner balance. This is Marvel, of course, which means that it can't be done without inserting a joke every minute or two, but even the lighter moments are actually used pretty effectively to prod deeper commentary on Jen's general life situation, mental health, etc., and it works well. Third, this episode's ending injected some badly needed stakes into this show. She-Hulk, ever since episode 1, has fumbled around trying to find its way with only the loosest of connective tissue from episode to episode, most of it having to do with the so-called boss, a presumably bad guy who wants Jen's blood and who appears to be tied to the intelligentsia from last episode. Given that the boss seems to have exactly what he or she wants now, and given that we'll finally be getting Daredevil next week, it looks like this show is finally starting to ramp up in preparation for a major climax. Being that She-Hulk's episodes tend to be about 30 minutes long, and that the season only has 2 episodes left, the show still has a bunch to wrap up in what'll probably amount to a little more than an hour of screen time. And I personally am really uncertain about how well She-Hulk as a show is going to stick that landing, but that's a problem for another review, I guess, a problem for my entire season review when I get there. Okay, now the bad. The fact that this episode was the best of the lot does not mean that it did not have problems, because it did. The CGI, of course, is awful again. I remember how when Disney Plus first launched, Kevin Feige said that D Plus shows would be different from other Marvel shows on Netflix and ABC and Hulu because they'd be made with the same budget and quality of big screen films. And maybe that was true of some of the earliest stuff like WandaVision or Loki, but I am here to tell you that with She-Hulk Attorney at Law, at least, that promise has been proven a lie time and time again. This episode's She-Hulk effects in particular felt no better than something that I would see on, say, a CW show like The Flash. Jen's bonding with Blonsky's whole support circle seemed way too rushed, especially when you factor in how one of the guys in that group straight up attacked Jen outside of her apartment and tried to steal her blood, and suddenly they're okay within probably 2 or 3 minutes of sitting down in the share circle in this episode. Speaking of that guy, Wrecker, Garth, whichever, I forgot the whole name, Garth Waith, I think, or something. But anyway, speaking of that guy, Wrecker, it is this episode's biggest plot hole that Wrecker, after making amends with Jen, wouldn't have just warned Jen that there's a big boss out there who hired him to steal her blood and who will almost certainly try it again. On the one hand, I get that if he did warn Jen about that, Jen probably would have taken out the boss immediately and ended the whole show within about 5 minutes, but still, it's almost unbelievable that this guy, if he's truly reformed, would never have thought to at least mention to Jen that she might be in danger. The character of Josh has been such a clear villain to me since just about the start. Again, this is the MCU. Lasting, meaningful romances are about as rare here as iridium. Love interests tend to either die tragically or be revealed as evil at critical story junctures. So the idea that Jen just happened to bump into a perfect guy who automatically loved her for her and never even mentioned She-Hulk was just too obvious to be true, and I felt that way last episode. Now, make no mistake, the whole meet cute between Jen and Josh in the last episode was great, and like I said, this episode's opening montage of Jen slowly falling in love with him was truly spectacular. It had me laughing, it had me feeling alongside her there. But I also felt a little detached from it, knowing that Josh was almost certainly going to wind up betraying Jen and breaking her already fragile heart, which is exactly what he did at the end of the episode, even if she doesn't know it right now. Okay, so down to brass tacks. She-Hulk Attorney at Law's 7th episode is by no means perfect, but it is a worthy watch, as well as the best episode of the current lot. I give She-Hulk Attorney at Law Episode 7, The Retreat, 3 Cronuts out of 5. At any rate, tell me what you think in the comments below. If you disagree, please let me know. If you like this video, don't forget to leave a like, click subscribe, and please ring that bell. So long, guys.